Welcome back. Yes, while the game was going on tonight between Winnipeg and Toronto, I did make up the board for Anaheim missing the playoffs and what happened because I am very much used to being one video ahead of myself as much as possible. And I wanted to talk about the Ducks, and I wanted to use both the magnet I recently purchased, which is this beauty here, which Amazon, and this one that was sent to me by a subscriber that's pretty fantastic. And they brought back the Wild Wing this year. They knew that this season was going to be ugly, so they brought back the ugliest jersey in the history of sports. And for that reason, I loved it. And I was very glad that they brought it back so that I don't have to pay the $600 required for the actual Wild Wing jersey they wore back in the 90s. That's the going rate. In Canadian dollars, you can get it for 500 US, or you can get those cheap knockoffs that are the wrong color. And I'd rather not get one that's the wrong color because that would drive me completely mental. That would completely drive me over the edge. So in a season where they brought back the Wild Wing and they only wore it twice because that's the max that you want to see them wearing, though. Like, the idea is really funny, and then you actually see them wearing it and you're like, oh no, that's sad. So their overall record was sad as well, 17-30-9. But we knew this was coming. We knew at the start of this season that Anaheim was in a division where they were not going to be very competitive. The work ethic was there. The goal scoring was not. 126 goals scored. Really poor goal scoring numbers from Anaheim this year, which again we knew. And they had that problem last year. They didn't do anything to address it this year because they knew this is a rebuild. We're going through the necessary pain before we get to the good side of things. Their goals against 179. Their power play anemic. 8.94%. You're not going to win very many games with a power play that's that bad. Penalty kill 79.88%, so definitely better than the power play. But those numbers combined means you're going to lose a lot of games because you're special teams. So that's where they're at. And when you look at their top scorer, this is where you can tell things are pre-bounce back for them. Max Comtois, who worked really hard. He's one of the hardest working players in the National Hockey League. 55 games, 16 goals, 17 assists, 33 points. And he's a good player. But when Anaheim becomes a good team, he will not be their leading scorer because that's where your star players come up. And right now they're what? They're second from the bottom of the league. So you've got Buffalo's 31st overall. They're 30th, I do believe, which means the lowest they can draft this year is 4th. So that's good news for Anaheim. That in a draft, and I know it's kind of a crapshoot of a draft, but they should be able to at least get a really good defenseman out of this draft, or Beniers, if Beniers falls to them. So when I'm looking for an underperforming big contract, I could have used Getzlaf. Absolutely could have used Getzlaf, except we all know he's at the tail end of his career. I went with Silverberg, who for the money that he's being paid, 8 goals and 8 assists over 47 games is not quite in the realm of what they want from him. They want a guy who's going to average out to 20 goals over an 82-game schedule. They want somebody who's maybe got 25 goals in him over an 82-game schedule. And it was, again, it feels bad to put Silverberg up there, but I have to put somebody up there for each team. There were other players that could be used. You can absolutely name other guys in the section, in the comments below that underachieved. There were a lot. So he wasn't alone, but to me, he's the one that I'm going to put on the board. So apologies to Jacob Silverberg. Their top goaltender, John Gibson. He didn't have a banner season either. And it felt a lot like last year, where early on he was playing really, really well. And then at some points it feels like he gets frustrated with the defense in front of him, gets frustrated with the team. He ends up 9-19-7, 903 save percentage, 2.98 goals against average. And, at the end of the season, Stolarz was kind of playing better than he was. But again, for Gibson, it looks like he's just kind of worn down. And after this season's done, he even says, in interviews, yeah, when I signed the contract in Anaheim, I had every intention of staying here, and I'd like to, and he doesn't want to trade, but he's getting tired of all the losing. So this is where when you're in a rebuild, sometimes the players that are on these teams that are rebuilding don't like the rebuild. They don't enjoy going out there and losing all the time, and they shouldn't. So that's a good thing that you have a number one goaltender that's saying, I'd rather not lose this often, because hopefully that means next year they don't. And next year, things should start getting better. So they're pending UFAs. Some of these guys are retiring. Backus already announced he's retired. Miller retired. But again, they're expiring contracts coming off the books. Anyways, Ryan Getzlaf hasn't decided whether or not he's going to come back next year. If he comes back, I would think Anaheim signs him. It'll be for a lot less than what he's been making. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like $1 million. That would not entirely surprise me if he said, I'll come back for $1 million, spend the money elsewhere and help this team get better, and I'll play a diminished role and help out. Andy Walensky, pending UFA, and Carter Rowney, pending UFA as well, who I like as a bottom six forward. Rough season for him with injuries. So their RFA list is interesting too. Danton Heinen, who did not have a great season for them. And Danton Heinen he's tricky to pin down. Sometimes he looks like he could be a 20-goal scorer. Sometimes he looks like he might get 10. And in the end of the season, his numbers always seem to be a little bit below what you would have expected for him at the start of the season. Isaac Lundestrom took a nice step this year. I don't know how much offensive upside's there. I also don't know how much offense upside there is there for Max Jones and Sam Steele. And they're both still very young. So Anaheim may very well be able to get them to that next level. But I'm having my doubts probably more with Jones than Steele, and maybe it's a blind spot for me that I still believe in Sam Steele, but I still do, and he only had, I think, 6 goals, 6 assists this year. But it's got to come around. And Maxime Comtois, or Max Comtois, depending on how he wants to be called, Comtois, honestly, really hard worker, really like the guy, plays with a bit of an edge, and he's the kind of forward that absolutely can be useful to this team anywhere in those top 3 lines when they start getting better. And Alexander Volkov, who was picked up from Tampa, initially started out scoring more than he was in Tampa at a higher rate anyways, and it kind of tailed off a little bit. But you still get the feeling that next year with a clean slate, brand new season, that Volkov may be capable of, 15 goals, maybe 30 points. I'm going to go crazy with this because A, it's Anaheim, and B, you can't expect that every player that leaves Tampa is necessarily going to explode offensively. But he should put up some decent totals if he gets the ice time, and he should. So when we look at the 22 and under crew on this team, there were a lot of young guys on this team. Max Comtois, again, 22 years of age, top scorer, RFA as well. Should be interesting to see how much money he gets. Of their RFAs, he's the one that can sit down and say, I deserve a big raise, and it is hard to argue he doesn't deserve a raise. Trevor Zegras, he comes into the lineup, and I like Zegras right from the start. He ends up going down to the AHL, transitions to center there, figures it out, comes back up to the NHL level, and was much better after that demotion and then a recall. Sam Steele, Max Jones, so these guys again, younger players, RFAs. What are we going to see from them? What role do they have going forward? You can throw Troy Terry into that. Troy Terry's 1 year older than they are. There's a lot of forwards who play a similar role with this team. And during the offseason, maybe you look at the guys who have more offensive upside and you keep them, and then the other players, maybe you're willing to trade them to get help somewhere else in the lineup. So we'll see what happens in the offseason with them. Isaac Lundestrom, I already mentioned him before as well. He's an RFA. Jamie Drysdale. Really baptism by fire for Jamie Drysdale. I would not read a whole lot into his stats from this year. I wouldn't, honestly, because this team was in free fall when he's picked up and put in the lineup. And he was put in all situations, played a ton of minutes. And I honestly felt bad for Drysdale. I don't think there's very many teenager defensemen that could come in and do anything with that. You're 18, 19 years of age, and you're out there playing against some of the players he was playing against. He did as well as he could. But if you're putting a teenager out and you're playing him a lot, there's the risk that maybe it adversely affects him later. But Drysdale's a really good, solid player. I don't see that adversely affecting him later. And Josh Mahura, who I think is an undervalued, underrated defenseman for them. And if it doesn't end up working out in Anaheim, it'll work out somewhere. I do think he's an NHL-level defenseman. But, again, he's young. We'll see if he gets a regular spot with them next year. You have to think there's going to be turnover. Now, their key injuries. I want to come to this, because this is where, again, if you didn't really follow the Ducks, you may not have known. But Carter Rowney, of course, I mentioned, he's RFA, underrated, bottom six forward for them. But Hampus Lindholm missed more than half the season. And this is a defense that was already pretty slim on the talent side of things as it was, like in terms of players that could really bring it and play 23, 24 minutes. Lindholm can. And so with Lindholm not in the lineup, that makes an absolutely huge difference for the Anaheim Ducks. And then Josh Manson missed a lot of time. So that's 2 top 4 defensemen that missed a lot of time for the Ducks. And when those guys are in the lineup and they're playing well, it makes a gigantic difference. So it was just an overall write-off of a season for the Anaheim Ducks. And you go into next year hoping that you start making that progression back to respectability. Didn't help them being in this division, but we'll talk about that as well after looking at their records for each top 10 or each 10 games. 3-5-2 after the first 10. So they started off poorly, and we knew they weren't gonna go anywhere. 6-10-4 after the next 10. So they had the same record the first 10 and the second 10. 8-16-6 after 30 games. So the bottom's really fallen out at this point. 12-21-7 after 40 games, 15-28-7 after 50, and 17-30-9 after 56. They did show some decent results and some good fight here and there, and they were good on the road. That's the weird thing with the Ducks. At home, they were awful. 6-18-4. On the road, they were 11-12-5. So if they can figure out how to play at home the way they were on the road this year, they can get back to 500 next year. And it's possible that with the divisions going back to normal, playing a full 82-game schedule, their points percentage should get better. Last year, their winning record, like, it wasn't a winning record, but their record was better last year than this year, and I don't think this division helped them. Against Arizona, they were 2-4-2 on the season. They were also 2-4-2 against Colorado. Played Colorado just as tough as they played Arizona. They were 4-4 against LA, so their highway rivalry with LA was alive and well this year. 1-5-2 against Minnesota, so that hurts. 4-3-1 against San Jose. So against the other California teams, just proves California teams just they weren't very good this year. St. Louis, they were 3-5 against St. Louis, and they were 1-5-2 against Vegas. So you look at Vegas, Minnesota, and Colorado, they won a total of 4 games out of 24 against those 3 teams. Nobody's going to survive that over this season. So there's a lot to learn from this year. And again, we'll see how they do next year. Like I said, they did better on the road than they did at home. I think Dallas Aikens probably comes back as coach. I don't think there's going to be a change at GM either. Maybe, maybe not. I know there's Duck fans that'd like to see it happen. But yeah, the Ducks are kind of where we expected them to be. And I think things will start getting better next year. But it's going to be gradual. I don't think there's going to be a huge jump for them just yet. I think there's going to be probably one more year of pain before things get into the realm of, hey, they can make the playoffs. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below regarding the season that the Ducks had in 2021. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.